Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, everyone, depending on where you are and when you're watching this. My name is Miriam Stark, and I'm the director for the Center for Southeast Asian Studies here at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And it's my great honor to welcome today's inaugural symposium, really, for the Careers in Asia Pacific Affairs program that our School for Pacific and Asian Studies is hosting through our Natural Resource Center funding through Title VI in the Department of Education. We're very fortunate today to have two great colleagues, one of whom we know and work with, Carol Lee here, and one of whom we just met, who is Larry Chun. And we're going to talk today about his work as a diplomat and a special agent working with the U.S. Foreign Service. The way that we'll structure this is that he'll give some presentation, we'll have some video, then there will be questions back and forth, and we encourage everyone who's watching to ask questions. Either you can raise your hand if you're here, or you can just put your question in the Q&A and we'll try and open it up so you can ask. But we're very honored to have both of our colleagues here. Just to let you know that Larry Chun, who's here through the Hometown Diplomat program, grew up here in Kailua. He's a Maryknoll grad, and so he could tell you a lot about Maryknoll. I have questions. And then he went to Portland State University and he got a bachelor's degree in economics and business management. He also worked in a number of jobs in the public and private sectors before joining the Foreign Service. So he has a variety of different experiences that he brings to the work he does. And the work he does is a career in government. And we're hoping that you'll all learn a lot, including us, about careers in government from this talk. Let me please introduce both Larry Chun and Carol Lee. So Larry. Thank you. I'll just give you a hug. All right, thank you so much.
Great, well, thank you very much, everybody. First, thank you very much to the University of Hawaii, Center for Southeast Asian Studies, as well as Carol for moderating this. We're going to start off with a video, kind of an overview about the Foreign Service, specifically the career of a diplomatic security agent, as well as a diplomatic security specialist that also work with us.
We are diplomats.
Law enforcement officers.
Security professionals.
We secure our embassies and consulates.
Conduct investigations.
Protect our diplomats.
And our nation's secrets.
We are the Diplomatic Security Service, DSS.
We are trusted.
Dedicated.
We come from diverse backgrounds.
Speak multiple languages.
And help deter crime, terrorism, and espionage around the world.
Our badges are gold.
Our passports are black.
We are
DSS.
Take a look at a world map and then pick a country, any country. Quick. What's its current relationship with the United States? Has it always been that way? Or could our relationship change quickly, without notice? Now, take these questions and multiply them by over 175 countries, and you get an idea of the scope undertaken by the U.S. Department of State on a daily basis. And indispensable to their mission is a small but vital law enforcement organization office whose members are charged with protecting their fellow diplomats, U.S. embassies, and the nation's highest secrets. Welcome to the Diplomatic Security Service, DSS. Within DSS, there are 4 groups of specialists, each with its own skills and mission, and each with its own set of challenges.
It's an adventure. An adventure doesn't have to be good or bad. It is an adventure, though. You may be doing something different. You may be taking yourself out of your comfort zone.
A career with diplomatic security is certainly not for everyone. It comes with inherent challenges that you have to, as an individual and as a family and as a community, you have to deal with.
You're always new wherever you go. You're always like setting up. You're either packing or unpacking or bidding for an onward assignment. But that's also some of the fun.
If you don't like being able to, move at a moment's notice and go, long hours traveling, that it might not be the job for you, but it's one of the things that I really enjoy.
Every day is a new challenge, and we have an obligation to protect the people and information worldwide. And there's only a few of us, and that's a big challenge.
Regardless of their specific jobs, DSS Foreign Service specialists have this in common. Once hired, they complete months of training. They spend half of their careers overseas. They learn the languages and cultures of the countries in which they live. With few exceptions, they all have college degrees. Yet surprisingly, many do not have backgrounds in law enforcement.
Most DS agents come from a wide variety of backgrounds. We have medical doctors, we have biology teachers, many have PhDs.
I had very few law enforcement or prior military in my class. We had architects, we had engineers, we had journalists.
We have that diversity of thought, diversity of experience, and we have people from different branches, from prior lawyers, prior investment bankers, prior teachers, and they all bring something to the table that adds skills and experience to accomplish the mission.
DSS employees enjoy a number of unique benefits. It's just one of many reasons most choose to stay with the department for the remainder of their careers.
The housing is one of the main benefits. When you're overseas, the embassy provides your housing. That's a very large perk and attraction financially for the department.
Getting an education allowance for your child in a private school that is tax-free, that's a difficult benefit to beat, especially if you're trying to compare what you'd be offered in the private sector.
The reason I really took this job is for the stability. These are the best benefits in the world in the Foreign Service.
My favorite aspect of this job is the people I get the opportunity to work with. Wherever you go, you get to interact with wonderful people.
I've always loved traveling and seeing the world, but over time, I've grown to appreciate more and more the opportunities it's given me to serve and to be of use to my country.
The thing that appeals to me most about this job is the service element. I would like to think that that service element is in it for absolutely everyone with whom I work and with whom I come in contact.
No matter who you are, what your background is, you're probably wanted and you're probably needed. So you don't need to be in the military, you don't need to have this analytical background. You just need to try and maybe see the potential and see your worth, because it could be needed.
Our mission is to keep people safe, to ensure that people can go to work and be safe and secure while they're operating in the diplomatic mission. So the things that I fix keeps people safe.
If you're looking for a challenging, rewarding, but more importantly, an important job that protects American people and protects American foreign policy, then there is nowhere else to look.
This is DSS, the nation's most elite law enforcement and security agency. A highly diverse and inclusive workforce that reflects the best traits and values of our country while serving overseas and at home. If you are ready to protect your country, travel abroad, and discover a career like no other, check us out at careers.state.gov/DS.
Larry, for being here today. We're very excited for what you have to say, especially
made a turn around one of the switchbacks and
for someone who grew up here. So if anyone has any questions throughout this presentation, please feel free to utilize the Q&A box if you're online. And for those of you who are here, if there's something that Larry has said that you want to follow up on, please feel free to raise your hand and I'll keep an eye out. But before we start, I'll just introduce myself briefly. My name is Carol Lee, and I'm the director of the Young Leaders Program at Pacific Forum, a nonprofit foreign policy research institute based here in Honolulu, Hawaii. And we work very closely with our partners here at UH Manoa. And I'm so excited to be here today. And for anyone who's interested in learning about Asia-Pacific affairs, Indo-Pacific affairs, to slowly get to a position like Larry, please do email me and look me up on Pacific Forum's website. We have a lot of different next generation initiatives. So just to start off, Larry, do you mind telling us why you decided to come and speak to us today and your current professional profile and how long you've been in this position?
So currently I'm a special agent with the Diplomatic Security Service. I've been in this role since 2021. And what brought me here today was the Hometown Diplomat Program. It's a program within the State Department that allows people to talk to schools and universities in the hometown to the states where they're from. And being from Kailua, it's a small town, and when I was growing up, I never had that I always wanted to do something bigger in the foreign service and see the world, but I never really knew how to get there. So being able to give back to the community is something that I really enjoy.
Thank you so much. And I know you did mention that it's not something that you thought you wanted to do at first, but you slowly kind of grew and you were interested. So what prompted you to join the foreign service and do something bigger beyond the small hometown?
Right, so I always was interested in both law enforcement and international travel. My father was in the Air Force. He actually met my mother at University of Hawaii with the Newman Center nearby. And so it's nice coming back here for that. But being in the Air Force, we traveled around a lot when I was growing up. I spent some of my childhood in Japan, and that was always really neat, getting to see other cultures, hearing his stories, looking at his photo albums. And I thought, that'd be really cool to be able to explore the world like that. So the foreign service came to me. Some friends that I knew from the military introduced me to the role in the foreign service that I'm currently with right now.
Very cool. Thank you for being here to introduce that the world that you're in to a lot of our students and even faculty here, and myself included. Pacific Forum does work a lot with Department of State, but I didn't even know that there was a federal agent or special agent role within the state. So I was wondering, you are both in the foreign service as well as a federal agent or special agent. So how does that work?
So the Diplomatic Security Service is the law enforcement branch within this department, the U.S. Department of State. So we're tasked with two separate missions. So domestically, our main focuses are federal law enforcement investigations, so similar to the FBI, and we focus on passport and visa fraud investigations. Then we also have a protection mission. So just like the Secret Service protects the president, the Diplomatic Security Service protects the Secretary of State as well as other visiting foreign dignitaries. And then, go ahead. And then, so on the diplomat part, when we're overseas, we also work in what's called the Regional Security Office, which is located in consulates and embassies overseas. And the simplest way to kind of describe it that I tell my friends, it's kind of like you're like the sheriff of the embassy. So you are the key law enforcement official overseas. You work with the host nation, law enforcement partners to share best practices, conduct investigations. You manage security programs to protect U.S. Embassy personnel at facilities.
Cool, and they both sound like very different roles. So how do you juggle between the two, or do you kind of find yourself doing both with every assignment? How does that usually work?
So that's a good question. So being a law enforcement officer, you might think about somebody who's like carrying a gun and arresting people, and then when you think of diplomat, you think somebody who's shaking hands and signing treaties and things like that. But really, the job skills that are required, they really go hand in hand. Being able to work with other people, to build relationships, to foster partnerships, that's really the overlap between the two jobs.
And I know myself included, when I think of state, I think of, the 50th state, the 50 states of the United States. So maybe for some people who don't even know that we do have a Department of State, U.S. Department of State. What is it and why does it matter?
That's a great question. So a lot of times when I talk to people, I say, I work for the State Department. I go, like Board of Water Supply or Department of Education. U.S. Department of State. The U.S. Department of State is the diplomatic branch that extends foreign policy to the rest of the world from the United States. So the Secretary of State is appointed by the President, and he is there to carry out the foreign policy on behalf of the United States. So for over 200 years, the State Department has been out there connecting with people throughout the world.
And within that, what is diplomatic security and why does that matter?
Okay, so diplomatic security, again, like the video kind of mentioned, so we are that branch within the State Department that enables U.S. diplomats to work overseas. We manage those security programs, and also as I mentioned, the passports that people are issued as those are State Department controlled documents. So that's our purview.
And I assume that, if we're in hundreds of countries, over 100 countries around the world, it's a very big bureau. But for people who are very interested in joining the U.S. Department of State, and knowing that all the positions are a little bit different, do you mind discussing a little bit about the hiring, the recruitment process, and specifically for your position?
So for diplomatic security special agents, there's a multi-step hiring and training process. So the first part of the hiring process is going to be going to careers.state.gov, filling out the online application, and then you're going to take a online assessment test. It's kind of the first step. After that, you'll take a test at one of the Pearson U centers. It's a standardized test to kind of going over a number of different scenarios that you might encounter as an agent. Assuming you get past that phase, you're going to have to write an essay, go to a panel interview, and once you've passed those steps, you need to do a background investigation to make sure that you can maintain a top secret clearance, as well as have a physical fitness test.
Just kind of writing it down. So test, essay, interview, background check, physical fitness. It sounds like quite a process to get hired. So what does training look like for this position?
So training for our position, and I can back up a little bit too, talking about the Foreign Service officers, which is another track in the Foreign Service. Their hiring process is slightly different than ours. They have more of a formalized Foreign Service officer test, which is now no longer a critical requirement as an entryway to get into the Foreign Service. They're looking at the whole person approach when it comes to Foreign Service officers. In terms of the training process for diplomatic security special agents, again, it's one of those multi-step processes. First, we go to orientation in Washington, D.C., where we're mixed the Foreign Service specialists as well as the Foreign Service officers. And it's a 6-week orientation class on how to be a diplomat. So basic reading, writing skills that you might encounter in terms of cable writing or things specific to the department. Also getting presented with situations that you might encounter when you're working overseas, and an introduction to other departments that you might see when working in an embassy. Then for us, we go down to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, which is in Glencoe, Georgia. That's a 13-week course where we learn how to become criminal investigators. That course, it's basically like becoming a federal agent college, basically. So you learn everything from interviewing techniques, report writing techniques, driving, shooting, physical fitness, medical training, the whole gamut. Once you get out of that training, we actually have another follow-on training that's approximately 3 months at the Foreign Affairs Security Training Center, which is in Blackstone, Virginia. And that's specific to diplomatic security agents. So we learn about close protection, again, that bodyguard type of work that you're going to see the Secret Service doing. We learn how to conduct diplomatic security specific investigations around passport and visa fraud, and then additional firearms and driving training. So it's a lot of training.
I was about to say, I feel very comfortable that one goes through so much training before being shipped off. So that's really great. And so after going through all that training, once you're in the job, what does a typical day at work look like for you?
So fortunately or unfortunately, depending on what you like, there's no such thing as a typical day. Like I mentioned, there's 2 different missions domestically, and then you also have the overseas mission. So typical day domestically, if we're doing investigations, could be doing database searches, conducting surveillance, interviewing victims or suspects. We could also be reaching out to our overseas counterparts if we have an international investigation. If we're doing something protection related, we could be doing site advances. So that's going to a venue, talking to their security personnel, the managers, making sure that we can create a safe and secure environment for whoever that dignitary is going to be, so that they can conduct diplomacy, whether it's the Secretary of State going overseas or somebody else visiting the United States. Making sure that we can create that safe environment for diplomacy to occur is a critical mission for us. And then when going overseas, you get even more variation on what can happen day to day. So you could be doing emergency management planning. You could be working with your locally employed staff on security programs for their residential compounds, making sure that all the diplomats are safe. Be working with the Marines who we manage overseas. It really changes day to day, and that's one of the really exciting things about the job.
Yeah, it sounds like it's very broad. It covers so many different aspects, but each aspect is so important. And we were kind of looking over your education background. It doesn't involve anything, politics or geographically focused. So with that in mind, what do you think is particularly helpful when any of our students or anyone who's interested is building their professional profile to be competitive for the Foreign Service?
That's a good question, and I'm glad you brought that up, because my background is not international, which means it's not focused on any one country. I think that the spark of interest that you have about studying another culture or another country, that's what's really going to propel you to have a passion to want to be in the Foreign Service and to succeed and to do well there. So I don't think you necessarily have to have a degree in the specific cultural area. That said, there are different languages. If you have them already, I believe, don't quote me on this, I think it's Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. So if you have those kind of hard to find languages, I do believe there are some preferential points that you'll get on the Foreign Service Officer side, but that list has always changed. For Foreign Service Officers, you also need to have a language rating before you get tenure. So that's one thing that if you already have that, studied an Asian language here, then you can be one step ahead of the curve.
Luckily here at UH Maryknoll, there's so many different languages that students study within the Center for Southeast Asian Studies, even South Asian Studies, Pacific Island Studies. So that's great. And I think when you mention, you know, the passion of learning about another culture and another country, I think especially if you grew up here or even lived here for a period of time, Hawaii is very multicultural. I think lends itself to that type of skill set and willingness to be very successful in the foreign service. So my follow-up question to that is, how does diversity, and in your case, being Asian American, play a role in your job?
And that's a really big push for the department. I mean, having a diverse workforce, it's really one of the strengths. People say that, oh, I mean, there's one school of thought that's not contained in the department, but there's one school of thought that, you know, security has to be very militaristic, it has to be a certain way, and there's only one way to do it. But that's really not the case. Having a diverse workforce allows for different skill sets, different cultural backgrounds, and that can go from, I mean, one, not looking like a cop, right? I mean, everybody's got this image of what does an FBI agent look like, right? 6 foot tall, blonde hair, like muscular. But having a diverse workforce allows us to have that variation when we're doing things as simple as surveillance, right? Having people that have different cultural backgrounds can gain insights into investigations, and even like working with other people, right? I mean, just having that background knowledge on this is how different cultures operate. Just one quick story about that. So 2 years ago, I came back to Hawaii for work for a trilateral summit with the Korean Foreign Minister, Japanese Foreign Minister, and the Secretary of State. And our detail was assigned to the Japanese Foreign Minister. And so, you know, kind of understanding Japanese culture, being around a lot of Japanese business people in my prior careers, I knew that everybody they're very, very formal, right? That's the Japanese culture, everybody's very formal. And our pickup was in the middle of the evening. And typically, it's in the middle of the evening, we'll dress down a little bit, right? It's just, you know, the middle of the night, we're going straight from the airport to the hotel. And I talked to my shift leader about this. Oh, sir, I really think we should suit up for this. Sure, I know, we kind of went back and forth, and then the morning of, I was like, sir, you know, I know we talked about this, but I really, really think we should suit up for this because, you know, and I didn't tell him this, obviously he knows this, but in the background, we're the first people that this foreign minister is going to see when he gets off the plane. We are the faces of the United States that he's going to see. We're representing our country, we're representing the Secretary of State. So we want to put on a good image. So he said, okay, yes, all right, we'll do it. It's going to be hot, but okay, I'll trust you, Larry. So we get to the airport, and everybody, including the cargo van driver from the Japanese consulate, is wearing a suit. He pulled me on the side. He's like, "Good call, suits." So that's, again, just kind of touching on how diversity and having that broad cultural background goes.
They were very lucky to have you that night. Can you imagine? So that's a great story, and thank you for sharing that. You know, I was kind of curious about how growing up in Hawaii specifically aided you in your career, especially since some of our audience members are students maybe who grew up here.
So I think the diversity that Hawaii has, that's probably helped me the most. I mean, growing up, I spent some time going to school on the mainland too, so you kind of have that. You know, on the mainland, if you're in the suburbs, because I stayed off campus, like you kind of go in the same circle, and there's not as much cultural diversity that you see in Hawaii, especially growing up in such a melting pot like Oahu is. So, like a lot of my parents were immigrants, and like they didn't speak English, so going over to their house, I didn't speak Chinese, and they didn't speak very good English, but you know, we all made it work, right? And going overseas and traveling, just having that understanding that things are different. If you're in different culture, things might not be what you expect in the United States. Overcoming language barriers. You know, it's kind of funny to me, if somebody speaks no English at all, sometimes you see people just slowing down as if that's going to help. And it doesn't help because they don't understand any English. Just like if they were to be speaking, you know, Farsi, like as slow as they speak, I'm not going to understand anything, right? So being able to kind of change levels. I think besides the language barrier part, it's just understanding that customs and cultures are different. So what we might expect in America or in the United States or even in Hawaii to be standard, because that's all we've seen our whole lives, being able to kind of lift that that thought that we have that everything is like this and go out there and be open-minded. I think that's something that growing up in Hawaii, where we have all that diversity, is really, really helpful.
Thank you for sharing even about like your family and having to overcome certain language barriers and still making it work. That's something that's very relatable for me as well. So my follow-up question is that, was there anything about growing up in Hawaii that hindered your career?
So I think so in Hawaii, like we're used to things being kind of laid back, right? I mean, Hawaiian time, right? We're also, we're kind of used to like being like knowing everybody. We know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody. And that relationship network that we have here makes it easier for us to kind of get by, I'd say, because you always know somebody, or like a fixer that can help you out with something, right? And it's can be kind of lonely. I mean, when you go overseas, you don't have that huge network, or when you're going to a new city, you don't have that huge network. So you have to build that network up wherever you go. You also have to be make sure you're not in Hawaiian time. You got to be mainland. So
I think going off of that point, of course, those who grew up here and are used to comfort and being around in this, very familiarity, and if they were to go abroad and, it's very new for them in the position, what are some tips, or in your experience, what are some things that have helped you, overcome things like homesickness or being far away from family and things like that?
Kind of goes to what I was talking about too, being able to be flexible, being able to talk to people, build relationships, and that goes for your own personal life too, not just your professional career. But there's various affinity groups that I've taken part of before, so that kind of helps because you get to meet other people that have shared or similar backgrounds, so you have that kind of familial sticking point. Even when I was going through my basic training, there was a group of 3 of us, Asian folks there, and we kind of dubbed ourselves the Federal Asians. Those Federal Asians. But no, like going like past that to just being able to reach out, right, during like American Pacific Islander Month. They had a highlight piece on one of the consul generals who's actually from Kahuku, and also a diplomatic security agent. So just being able to reach out and say, hey, how's it going, sir? It's really great to hear another local boy doing really, really well. And of course, he's way up here at this high level, right? So, but he reached out because that's kind of the culture, right? I mean, if you're from Hawaii or you've got a similar background, you don't want to see each other too well, right? So just being open-minded and friendly with everybody.
That kind of reminds me too, when I interned with the U.S. Department of State over the summer, you just meet so many people, and one of them even saw my LinkedIn and said, oh, you go to UH Manoa? Like, I went there at one point in time to learn Chinese, and then, we just connected that way. So I think thinking about making connections even when you are abroad and far away from home is very important.
Let me pause you right there. Yeah. So one huge factor that lets you make friends anywhere all over the world, being from Hawaii. I mean, that's a huge thing. People love it. That's a great conversation. So like, oh, where are you from? Or where'd you go to school? Where'd you do your undergrad? Where'd you do your graduate degree? If you say Hawaii, oh my gosh, like, I've been there before. Like, I got married there. It's a great conversation starter. So although you hear the same thing many, many times, but it's always fun to hear people having a good experience in Hawaii. It's a great bridge builder.
I definitely experienced that. Sometimes I feel kind of bad in a friend group. It's like everyone's introducing where they're from, and then when they get to you, Hawaii, wow! Like, time. Like, oh,
it was like the guy from Minnesota.
Yeah, for sure. So talking about the positives and now that you've been in this position for a while, what do you find most rewarding about your job, and what are some of the challenges that you've had to face in your daily work?
That's multi-part question there. So I think one of the things that I find get the most personal satisfaction out of is that I'm able to serve my country in a fun way that I really, really enjoy. What's awesome about the career is every assignment is 2 years long for us, right? So San Francisco for 2 years, and then I'll be going to Madagascar for 2 years. And then after that, I'll be going somewhere else. I could be doing investigative work like I'm doing in San Francisco, protection work, also doing in San Francisco, regional security officer work overseas. I can do program management in Washington, D.C. There we have full-time recruiters. There's just so many different things that you can do in the career that you're never going to get bored. For me, I really enjoy that. I can see with one organization that's got a mission that I believe in and that I can support and do that for the rest of my career. So I really find a lot of satisfaction out of that. I think many things, it's what you make out of it, right? Training, for example, training. Some people are like, oh, I hate training. I don't want to be in the training environment. I'm not learning anything. I've done this before in the military. Like, I don't want to do this. If you have a negative attitude about things, it's going to not be fun, no matter what you're doing. Same thing with the job. There's some hurdles that we go through, and the videos look cool, and I'll show some pictures later on. It all looks cool, but there's a lot of things that aren't as exciting. There's a lot of processes that are involved. Law enforcement is a very there's strict processes that are involved. Things aren't always quick. As you watch Y50, everything Daniel's got it solved, right? So some things just have to be able to be flexible, right? So having a positive attitude and seeing that change that you can make is something that I enjoyed. So, what was the second part of the question about most challenging?
Yeah.
I think the most challenging, it's good and bad that we get to move so often, because all those relationships that you build, for me, I'm kind of nostalgic. But that's something that hurts being from Hawaii. That holds me back a little bit, because a lot of Hawaii people are nostalgic, right? So going everywhere that you're going, you build all these great friendships and partnerships, and then having to leave that, it's kind of like a breakup almost. I mean, you're going to see them again. You realize the world is a really, really small place, but that it kind of hurts sometimes. And being able to kind of go past that and realize that you don't do it again, and those partnerships that you've built are gonna kind of continue on into the future.
Thinking about the challenge and having to move from one place to another, and even some folks here maybe just stay in the same town for their whole life or for generations. Are there any tips or tricks that you've developed that make it easier to move multiple times?
I'm not sponsored by Amazon, but having an Amazon Fire Stick is plug them into any hotel that you're at. I mean, you can watch, you can get your daily dose of whatever American TV show that you want. I think it's really just being open, right? I mean, if you're joining the Foreign Service, it's because you want to see the world, right? If you don't want to see the world, Foreign Service probably might not be the right fit for you. And I think just having that open mind and being flexible and understanding that the world isn't perfect. And that applies both to the career and the moving process, unfortunately, as well as when you're in different situations overseas, right? I mean, or domestically, your job. I mean, you think everything's going to go a certain way, and then life throws you a little bit of a curveball, and the situation changes, and you just have to be flexible with that. So I think just keeping an open mind and being flexible, that's really key. It's like a recurring theme with all of this.
Right, and that key theme, I feel like it's useful for even everyday life. Even if you do stay in one town, you're going to be dealing with curveballs and things that happen. So being able to have that in your job and apply that day to day is really, really meaningful, I think. And is there anything you want to highlight for people making that jump from Hawaii to the mainland, or even working internationally?
I think taking in all the experiences, I mean, that's one thing. So when we get to go, and again, I'll show some pictures of the protection trips that I've taken overseas while working at the embassy. One thing that a lot of people don't do is they don't take advantage of all of the opportunities that the career affords. So a lot of times when we're on trips, we have maybe like a rest day, prep day, and then the mission, right? A lot of people take that rest day to sleep, watch, use your Amazon Fire Stick, go to the pool, because where we're staying, I mean, the VIPs, we're staying at nice hotels, right? So people are taking advantage of that. But for me, I like to maximize my opportunities. So whenever I'm going to any new country, I want to pack in as much as I possibly can do in that country, because I might not ever go back. I'm never going to fly to Dubai to go to highly unlikely they'll just, oh, you know, we go to Dubai this week, right? But then going there for work, you're already there. You just have to go to sleep a little bit earlier so you can wake up earlier to get out, right? So I think it's just making sure that you're taking advantage of all the experiences. I'm in San Francisco, leaving San Francisco in 2 months, and I've got a whole list of things that I haven't done yet because you think that time is infinite, right? And I'm going to be here for a long time, and you don't realize how quick things. Taking photos, and that's a big thing. A lot of people. I have some photos, but I always wish like afterwards, like, oh, you know, I didn't, you know, telling family or friends about something to go. Should have taken more photos. So, simple things like that.
And as you were talking, I was just thinking, oh wow, we're very similar because for my job, I do travel as well. I was just in Bangkok and Singapore last month, and you know, kind of similar where we have, you know, designated work meeting days and then only one rest day. I was like, no, I'm gonna go, you know, go to the different temples and eat lots of food at the markets, the hawker centers, and you never know when you're gonna go back. So I do think that is the beauty of being able to be in this in the foreign service, these types of roles. For people who do want to apply, what are 3 core technical skills that you think are most applicable for pursuing a career in the foreign service or federal law enforcement? And maybe even if you don't mind talking about some personal qualities that maybe some of our students should be developing over the next few years.
So, you know, I do recruitment talks here and there, and people are always looking for like the silver bullet, like how fast do I have to be able to run a mile? You know, what kind of scores do I have to score on my test? Things like that. And really what it comes down to, the most critical skill in both law enforcement as well as being in the foreign service is those interpersonal capabilities that you have. Having good interpersonal skills, being able to read and write. You know, of course, you need to hit the minimum qualifications. You have to have your college degree to be able to write succinct essays, things like that. But interpersonal skills, being able to read, being able to write well, and having an open mind, right? That's really, really critical. Being a good follower too, I think is one thing, because this foreign service recruits a lot of folks that are really high performers, right? And people that are high performers, they're kind of they come from backgrounds where they're kind of at the top of their game. But then if you're a big fish in a small pond, and then you go into the ocean, you have to just have that humility to understand that you're not the big fish anymore. And that also ties into being able to go overseas and work overseas as well, right? Some people that aren't very successful have this idea that, hey, you know, I'm an American, I'm right, this is how we do things in America. And again, that's not how you make friends. That's not how you build partnerships. And having that humility to also be able to not only see past yourself and amongst your peers and where you're at, but also to, you know, when you're in other countries, being able to recognize that, hey, they've been around for a long time too, having an open mind to see what they're doing.
Do you mind recapping any take-home points or pieces of advice for us after, you know, this talk and you kind of reflecting on your career?
I think I mentioned it, just having fun, right? I mean, making sure that you care about the mission that you're doing, and whether it's, you know, joining the foreign service, whether it's, you know, doing something else with your degree that you enjoy. I think if you enjoy your career and you really believe in what you're doing, it sounds really cheesy, but I mean, if you find that niche, to use kind of the buzzword, when you find your tribe and you know what you like and the people that are around you have a similar mindset and you guys are all working towards a similar mission, that's really, really huge. So I think having passion for what you're doing is really, really important. And again, just being able to get along with people, that's really, really huge. The introduction. I mean, I've had a lot of different careers, and you see it a lot where people aren't able to build those interpersonal skills, those relationships, those teams, and that's not you need that to be successful in any career that you're in.
Thank you. That is all the questions I've had. So I'm going to open it up to the audience. If anyone has any questions, or if anyone has any questions online, we'd love to have you throw it in the chat, or we can even invite you to speak and ask Larry your question from the comforts of your own home.
Could I start just by saying thank you very much? And you had other careers before, Larry. So I'm curious about how some of those careers maybe gave you skills that you're using now. I think it's important for people to know that they don't have to know at age 22 that they're going to go into the foreign service, that they might have a bunch of different career paths for a while and then get there. Like, are there some jobs that you liked even though you didn't want to stay in them long term and that sort of helped you develop skills?
Oh, sure. Okay. How much time do we have? So my first job out of college was with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I was an agricultural statistician. And that was right out 2009, so right after the recession. It was hard to find jobs. And I found that job and they offered to send me back to Hawaii. It was a federal job. So like, federal job in Hawaii? Okay, great. Did I know a lot about agriculture? No. Statistics? Yes. And that's kind of how I fit into the role. That was interesting work, and agriculture definitely plays a huge role in the American economy. For me, though, that's not necessarily where my passion was at. But that job taught me really important skills. One, learning the government systems, right? Understanding that you're part of a bigger machine. You're not, even though the field office is small and you know everybody there, you're part of a bigger mission, and it's not just about you and your office. We also conduct, so part of that role that I had, we had to go out and conduct surveys about agricultural crop yields with farmers, right? So somebody was on the phone, you got to build that partnership over the phone real fast and have them not hang up on the guy from the government who's calling, and also going to do site visits. We also worked with some international partners that came to Hawaii to learn some best practices. So again, being able to work with folks from other cultures, that was something that I picked up there. After that, I worked for the Walt Disney Company as an analyst. So that, even though I was not a guest-facing cast member, I serviced all the different departments internally, right? I worked over at Alani. So being able to, again, build those partnerships, work with other departments, get buy-in, right? Because if you are building those partnerships, when you need something, they can help you out. And when they need something, if you help them out, you kind of have that, that back and forth, right? So gained a lot from that, just in terms of that customer service and also like analytics and being able to write and to brief the senior leadership. That's what I gained that business. After that, I worked for a commercial laundry company. I learned about negotiation there, learned about processes and management as well, as I managed their uniform division. So we had vendors that we contracted with. So again, relationship building, understanding how to brief senior management, working with, I met with the general managers of half of hotels in Waikiki. So being able to present that product that you have, being able to interact at a high level, and then being able to communicate via email, written proposals, things like that. So those are some takeaways there. Then most recently, real estate. Real estate, you get to work with, all different types of people, all different backgrounds, different, but there's also language barriers there too as well, because housing is something that everybody needs, right? And so being able to overcome those things. In fact, one of my first clients was deaf, right? So being able to work with those challenges and say, hey, like, have a winning mindset. How do we solve this communication issue that we have, right? And some people, it's too hard. It's too hard. You just walk away. You don't want to do it, right? But via text, via ADA call lines, handwritten notes when we were doing showings, that was being flexible. That really taught me flexibility. I think the culmination of all those things make me successful. I was hoping successful in the career that I'm doing now. Sorry for the long answer.
No, that's great. I think it's important for students to know that they might try different jobs. Everything you described is within business and econ. Like what you went to college for is what you did, and you got experience in all of those fields, which feeds into what you're doing now. It's really helpful to hear that. Thank you.
Someone online asks, is there an age limit?
Age limit.
So the age limit to join Diplomat Security Service is 37. There might be, I believe, if you're in the military, then there's your years of military service accredited to add on. Also, if you lateral from another federal agency, then if you do a straight lateral, I believe you can do that even if you're above 37.
Yeah, so I don't know if we covered it earlier. It's running on Hawaii time, so when you talk about like the 2-year commitment, like I said, is there an entry level like years of service? Like in the military, should do 4 to 6 year contracts. and they maybe get like 2 bases or 2 locations in that time frame? And is there a pattern in terms of overseas domestic locations?
Yeah, it's a good question. So for diplomatic security special agents, I believe the training requirement is you have to stay around 1 year. I believe. Don't quote me on that. That's something I can get back to you on. Our first tour as special agents is domestically in a field office. So one of our 8 major regional field offices, that's where you need to sign. You can rank order where you want to go, but it's based on the needs of the service, and you're going to go where they tell you to go for your first 2 tours. After your first domestic assignment, your second tour, which is also directed at the needs of the service, you're going to get a list that you can rank order as well, and that has both overseas and domestic locations. And then once you're on your 3rd tour, then that's when you start bidding, and you're going to know where you're going to go. That said, to be completely realistic, that's really important as well. It goes with being normal and having good interpersonal skills. If you think that you're only going to work in Paris, Rome, and Tokyo, it's going to be a bad time. Just being open-minded about that as well.
I don't know.
Yes, yeah.
So I define it as FSO, and kind of described it as, I don't know if it's official or unofficial, but there's a pattern in terms of like, there's a danger element to some locations that some of these are say. So if you were assigned one more dangerous location, you're going to hire odds of getting less interest, quote unquote, more fun location after, or does it all depend on that time?
So that's a good question. So it multi-part answer. So for depending on where you're going, you're going to have different allowances, whether it's like a pay allowance or rest and relaxation tours afterwards. Most tours are going to be 2-year tours, but some of the more high threat countries are only 1-year tours. For the foreign service officers, their bidding works a little bit differently in terms of what they're allowed or not when they're coming out of a special instance for us, a very high threat area. But typically with the bidding process, they see that you've worked in difficult locations. That's done automatically to get somewhere else. Again, it depends on a lot of other factors, how your job performance, of course. But generally, your career development officer is going to try to put you somewhere that's maybe more amenable to you and your family. And that's another thing as well. So with the foreign service, making sure that your family is involved with whatever decision you're making is really, really critical. Like the video mentioned, there are great benefits. So your kids can go to international schools. You can get housing when you're overseas. But in some places, your family can't go with you. Or even if they can go with you, it might only be an adult family member. And the quality of life that you're getting in various countries, I mean, it varies. Again, understanding what is normal here might not be normal somewhere else. Yeah, absolutely.
Curious to follow up. I know you mentioned the bidding process. Do you mind describing to our audience members what that looks like, and not that how to get a higher chance of where you want to go, but realistically, how does that bidding process look like?
Sure. So again, for us as specialists, the first 2 directed tours, it's just rank ordering your list. You write a little blurb. Again, being able to write concisely and effectively is one of those very important skills. You're asking for budgetary things, or you're writing for to introduce yourself to an onward post that you're interested in. After those first 2 tours, you look at the bid list, see what's available, and a lot of it is timing. When does post want you, and when are you eligible to move? And some of that also ties into your language proficiency. So if you are going to a country that has a French requirement and they want somebody in October, you don't have any French, you're not going to be able to go because the pipeline for French can be 5-6 months, right? But if you have that language ready, then you'll be able to go sooner. So sort of like almost like an interview. So you'll reach out, you'll find out more information about that. You'll talk to your career development officer, and you'll kind of present the places you want to go and why. And then your career development officer will be your advocate to kind of push you forward. And again, it all depends. Being realistic and having options and staying flexible is very, very important.
So is it possible that within your one career, you might get training in multiple languages, Larry?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And how does that work? Like you have a 2-year posting, but part of the time is just learning languages. We had an interview with someone, now I forget who it was, and she said, oh, actually, I think it was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. It was Camille Dawson. Was she the one, or someone else in that group was saying, I'm gonna spend 6 or 8 months just learning language. Yeah, she was, what language, I forget which language she was gonna learn. But anyway, but she's a deputy assistant secretary. So it's the same for you, where there will be time that's just allocated to learning a language?
Yeah, so just, I mean, I'll use my own personal story from San Francisco, my first tour. So after I did all that training, about 9 months of training, got to San Francisco and did more training for our high threat program. And that's to prepare special agents to go overseas. And it was created after the Benghazi attacks. So that training is called Atlas, Advanced Tactics, Leadership and Skills. And so you work with, a lot of times we get to train with special forces folks, learn how to work around helicopters, night vision goggles, driving in the dark, things like that. And that's in living room force. Then after that, I got to go to serve in Mali for a month and a half. So that was very, very interesting. But again, like having all that training, you make sure you're ready to go wherever you're being deployed to, right? When I go back to San Francisco, I'll be there until the end of October, at which point I'll take 5.5 months of language, and then go to an admin school or a couple of admin schools into the spring of next year. And then I won't actually end up in Madagascar until August of next year.
But you were in Mali without speaking any of the languages there.
Correct, yeah. So my role didn't require that at that time.
And do you go to Monterey to learn your languages, or they have different?
So the Foreign Service Institute in Virginia is where foreign service specialists and officers go to learn our languages. But it's the counterpart to the Defense Language Institute, which is in Monterey. So it's very similar. So my job when I'm training is to train. So the department takes care of us. We don't have to worry about housing. We're also receiving a per diem allowance to make sure that our job is just to train. So being paid my regular salary to train, whether it's driving night vision goggles or to learn a language. And then to fully answer your question on your follow-on tours, say I'm going from Madagascar to Japan, if that position requires a language, then I would go back to the Foreign Service Institute, take my language there, and then serve my tour. So your time in country, that general 2-year window like I talked about, that's after your schools that you have to take before you get out there.
But if someone, say, took Arabic, I know this is not Asia Pacific, but if they took Arabic, that would give them flexibility with a lot of countries, I suppose. Or French, or Spanish.
Exactly. And it's good that you brought that up. I know we talked about it earlier over the phone. So a lot of times people come into the Foreign Service, again, people are interested in working all over the world and being worldly, and they study a language and say maybe it's Japanese. So study Japanese and like, it's perfect. Ready for the Foreign Service, I know everything about Japan and ready to serve in Japan, and then they end up going to Africa, right? And for some people, there's a lot of frustration that kind of feels like, why aren't my skills being utilized how I think they should be utilized, right? And again, that goes back to the humility and being a good follower and just understanding like, this is your part of the bigger mission. It's not your show. You're on, you work for the U.S. Department of State as an extension of diplomacy, and your role right now is to learn French and go to Africa, not speak Japanese in Tokyo like you want.
I was gonna say, it's pretty cool that you get paid to learn how to drive with night vision goggles and learn a language. That's awesome. Oh yes.
I have a fun question. Have you met Anthony Blinken with you did? What do you think?
Yeah, have you met Anthony Blinken? Everyone wants to know.
Yeah, so I've met him a couple times on security details. He's very intelligent. And yeah, I mean, one of the awesome things about being in DSS is that we're giving an incredible amount of autonomy and responsibility very early on in our careers. Other agencies, you have to work your way up slowly, and there's a lot less flexibility. With diplomatic security, we're one of the smallest law enforcement federal agencies out there with about 2,500-ish agents. And so that forces us to be flexible, to think on our feet, and to take a lot of responsibility for whatever situations that we're in. So yes, I certainly has detailed a number of times.
I have a question. How did you prepare for,
I guess, studying, reading materials you went through in preparation for the first test that you took? And what kind of content is to be expected on that initial test?
So I picked up an LSAT book and just kind of went through some of it because a lot of it's like understanding written paragraphs, to pick out certain pieces from that, right? Ever since I was in high school, I read Time magazine, and I didn't know where to circle it and look it up, just building the vocabulary. So that was kind of the preparation I did. A lot of things are situational too, right? So making sure that if you just live in a bubble, you're not going to interact with people or have a lot of social interactions, so you might not know how to do anything, right? So being able to just have social interactions, being a interactive human being. I mean, a lot of the things on the judgment side just come from having common sense, which unfortunately is not so common. Sir.
So I'm in the reserve for the army, and we get encouraged to be political because of the organization that it is.
Sure.
And this was raised that like politics starts at the body's edge. We're going to do that other times where people have not abided by that, or it's domestic politics, and people's opinions start to place that has happened. How do you address that?
I mean, can you clarify a little bit more?
So if someone's like personal opinions about like domestic issues, voting, the president, and Secretary of State, so on and so on, like that, not agree with that. A follower, their voice, it's not of well, like this is the orders, but just influencing the workplace and black and public stuff that shouldn't be discussed in the workplace sometimes. That's ever happened.
So no, I haven't encountered that at all. And one thing that I'll say, a couple different ways to answer the question. So I haven't encountered people's different political views affecting the workplace at all. Again, being a good follower, I mean, understanding that you are representing the United States whenever you're overseas. You are that arm of diplomacy. You're that person to other people that you're working with. You are America, and you are speaking, for America. Even though, you might, Anthony Blinken didn't tell me what to say. I mean, when people see me talking at an event, I'm representing the State Department, right? And so just understanding that, having that responsibility, right? Understand that you have to kind of put that aside, put your personal beliefs aside, to, I guess, if you will, make sure that you're representing the department. Similar to the military, just to say. Another thing, the department is very good about creating an environment where bullying, racism, all those other things is not tolerated at all. It's an incredibly good workplace, I'd say, in terms of one, wanting to promote diversity, and two, ensuring that it's a place where people don't have to feel, I guess, uncomfortable about any one of those things that you find can be kind of hot topic issues. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. It's good to hear this. That's we're able to have conversations from home, conversations with your colleagues.
Oh yeah, no, I mean absolutely. I mean, the First Amendment is very, it's very important. I mean, everyone has a freedom of speech, right? That is an American value. Freedom of speech is definitely a value. And that said, you also need to understand when and where it's appropriate to be exercising.
It sounds like professionalism is a very important part of your job.
Absolutely, absolutely. One kind of fun story I'll tell. I've got a photo of it. So I was able to attend a groundbreaking when I was in Mali, and I represented the embassy meeting the gendarmerie, Post Nation Military Force, their Director General, at a groundbreaking ceremony for one of our anti-terrorism assistance kind of training sites. And so it was just me. So it was me and the general. We're there with the shovels, and we're talking via an interpreter. And it's just me. Like, I don't have anybody else. I can't turn to Mr. Blinken, sir, like, is it okay if I say this, right? I mean, he's not there. It's just me, right? So being able to have that professionalism, have good conversations, not overreach, but also to, extend that, that hand and say, hey, America's here, want to be partners with you. You have to be at that professional level to get those kind of opportunities as well. But that's what the State Department looks for. They want people that can be professionals in any kind of situation. I think that was that's diplomacy now, right? So.
You mentioned your photos. So if there's no other, oh, did you? Oh yeah. If there's no other questions from people, we can shift to showing some of your photos.
Oh, okay.
Oh yes. Sorry, one more.
The food in Mali was it was good. I mean, it's all like a lot of like stews and things like that. And the Indian food was surprising. A lot of Indian food there. Indian food was amazing. So yeah. And it's interesting. There's pizza everywhere. Pizza is all over the world. That's a universal thing. So
You'll never have to miss pizza.
Exactly,
Then it sounds
exactly.
like.
Oh, yeah. So this is kind of the highlight reel, if you will. So what this doesn't show is standing, watching a motorcade overnight when it's super humid, just being by yourself. So, yeah, so it's training in Washington, D.C., Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, Cherry Blossoms. And this is right, this is actually right after the Capitol insurrection. So I got there, I started on, was it January 16th? So right after that happened. So seeing all this, like juxtaposed, like being the voice of America and being a US diplomat, and seeing all this, I mean, it was really scary, and it was really stark contrast, right? It was an interesting time to be in Washington, for sure. Training, so training down in Georgia, a great place to be. You drive up to Savannah, kayaking, I go down to the Kennedy Space Center. One thing, I haven't compiled all the pictures, but diplomatic security and the training locations and work and mission locations I've been at, I've been able to see all the space shuttles domestic. So that's kind of a personal interest of mine that I'll be able to kind of tie into. Down in Florida, Long Bridge Trail, the High Bridge Trail in Virginia is the oldest fort in the United States. Down in Florida, St. Augustine. This is my BSAC training class, and if you look wet and exposed here, it's because this is right after we got pepper sprayed as part of the training process. And this is us all cleaned up at our graduation. And like I mentioned, my the federal agents in my cohort.
Federal agents.
First duty post, San Francisco. So my BSAC classmate. Bridge. My first assignment was to Qatar. So got to do some fun stuff over there.
Why do the camels have covers?
They can't bite. Coming back to Hawaii, I was able to be back in Hawaii, stay in Waikiki. That was kind of cool. Vacation while I wasn't working. Down in Palm Springs, got some hiking in. One of the nice things, now that we collect for diplomatic security, we get 3 hours per week to maintain our physical fitness. So big plus, you get paid to work out.
That's nice.
Mm-hmm.
Over in Madison, Wisconsin, all different climates. Again, being able to keep an open mind and be flexible and adaptable. Back in Hawaii, federal agent over there. So Moldova. So Moldova is really interesting. I got to go there right after the war in Ukraine started. That was one of the times when I was working with Secretary Blinken on his protected detail. So that was quite a trip. I mean, it's a pivotal world event, right? One of the cool things about being in the foreign service is you are kind of on that tip of the spear of diplomacy, seeing the world change, as it happens. Saudi Arabia. Also in Saudi Arabia, sometimes there's, like I said, there's the fun that gets interlaced into things. So our protectee went to go see the F1 race. Unfortunately, we weren't in the box seats like he was. Amsterdam, Frank House,
fruit waffles. Las Vegas, we participated in a recruitment event over there, as well as the Baker to Vegas ultra marathon relay. Panama, go see the Panama Canal. Panama hats. Fun fact: Panama hats aren't actually made in Panama. They're made in Ecuador. LA for the Summit of the Americas. I worked on our airport team, so working on the tarmacs, moving the airplanes, and then facilitating the safe and secure transport of foreign dignitaries through the airport so they can attend their conferences. Also got to go to SoFi Stadium. That was, again, kind of fitting in that fun when you can. It's a beautiful stadium. So yes, like I mentioned, affinity group. So I was able to represent diplomatic security at the National Asian Peace Officers Organization conference in Houston last year. Got some good barbecue as well. And again, those affinity groups. So I actually met more people in terms of San Francisco law enforcement officers there at that conference in Houston than I did than I have in San Francisco. So again, being able to, affinity groups, people want to work with other people, and it's so much easier when you kind of put yourself out there and you find people that have similar shared experiences. Saudi Arabia again, it's a good dip in the Red Sea. That's one of many mega yachts that we saw. Helicopter over there in the back, and it's so big that the photo can't even capture the whole thing. So you can see kind of interesting things like that. Going back to Qatar, was there for the World Cup, working on the Secretary's detail again. So I got very lucky in terms of when my shift started and ended, so I was able to see the men's opening game. So fun. Going to the United Arab Emirates, of course, Abu Dhabi, yes, so I went to Abu Dhabi as well as Dubai. And some people are like, oh, we're gonna, I'll take that hour-plus long cab ride up there so I can go see the Burj Khalifa, which is just, it's amazing. Like it's bigger than it looks on TV. You're just there like, it's huge. New York City for the UN General Assembly. I'll actually be going back to New York in October for the UN General Assembly. That's kind of the Super Bowl for us in diplomatic security because everybody attends the UN General Assembly. And then kind of offset over there, I put a couple of pictures of those are my BSAC classmates. So again, building those partnerships and those lifelong friendships, even though some of them I've only seen a couple of times or once over the last 2 years, it's really nice because, again, finding that tribe, finding those people with shared interests, making lifelong friends, that's easy to just pick up where you left off. This is our high threat training. So again, some similar characters over there. Lifelong friends, off-road training, some work in the helicopters. I got to go to Iceland, Wyoming, Japan. Like seeing a Japanese baseball game. If you've gone to Japan before, but you haven't seen a baseball game, you're missing out. So we went there, my buddy was like, we should really go to a game. We went to the game, it was amazing. And it's so nice over there because everybody is super polite. You don't get any of that rowdiness that you might see in American stadiums. It's quite a trip. And then Mali, so groundbreaking ceremony, working with the Marines. So that's, talking a little bit about like what you can do one-on-one, right? So overseas, when we're working with the Marines are, young individuals, and having that ability to work with them and give them experiences that they might not otherwise get to have, like working with host nation forces, life advice, like all those things. Being able to make those impacts in people's lives is something that I really, really enjoy. Paris, it's nice. And now I'm here. So again, the job's given me a lot of opportunities. I've got to travel the world, and it's only been about 2.5 years, right? So I can only imagine what the next 20 will be.
Wow, this is great. I just wanted to say thank you so much, both to Larry for coming, Carol for moderating, and to the audience who's been listening. We really are honored to have you here and look forward to hearing about the next places you travel. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.